What happens when money dies? It's a story we know all too well. An empire, a kingdom, a government runs short on cash. So, they make a quiet, tempting choice. They cheat. They take the coins in your pocket and shave off a little silver, mix in some cheaper metal. They print more paper bills, way more than they should. They make more money, but they make each piece worth less. We've seen it play out again and again. Ancient Rome did it. Their mighty silver coin became worthless copper. Germany did it after World War I. People needed wheelbarrows of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. It seems like the ultimate rule of history. All money, eventually, turns to trash. It's the iron law of financial decay. Empires rise, they spend, they panic, and they destroy the very thing that makes their economy work: trust. But what if that's not the whole story? What if I told you about an empire that broke this rule? Not for a decade, or even a century, but for 800 years. For 800 years, this empire used a single gold coin. A coin so reliable, so trusted, that it became the supreme dollar of its ancient world. From the frozen rivers of Russia to the bustling markets of China, from the palaces of kings to the pockets of merchants, this one coin was the definition of solid, unchanging value. While every other currency melted down, this one held firm. This is the story of the Byzantine Empire and its financial superweapon, the gold solidus. This is the story of the coin that refused to die. And the secret behind it isn't just about gold. It's about a promise, kept for centuries. A lesson in what it truly takes to build something that lasts. Let's find out how they did it. So, where does an 800-year miracle begin? It begins in total collapse. Picture the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. It's not the mighty empire of old. It's in chaos. Barbarians are hammering at the borders. Emperors are fighting each other in civil wars. And the government is bankrupt. To pay for all this, the soldiers, the wars, the chaos, they do the only thing they can think of. They start watering down the money. The famous Roman silver coin, the denarius, once pure, starts to change. They mix in more and more copper, making more coins from the same amount of silver. But everyone knows. Prices explode. A bag of coins that could buy you a farm one year can't buy you a chicken the next. The trust in the system is gone. The economy is in a death spiral. This is the world a young emperor named Constantine inherits. He looks at this mess, an empire cracking apart, fueled by worthless money, and realizes something radical. You cannot fix a broken empire with broken money. To build something new, you need a new foundation. So, in the year 309 AD, he lays that foundation. He creates a new coin. He calls it the solidus, from the Latin word for solid, reliable, unbreakable. This was not a small change. This was a revolution in a circle of gold. First, its weight. Every single solidus was struck to be exactly 4.5 grams. Not 4.4. Not 4.6. 4.5. Every time. For centuries. Second, and most importantly, its purity. This was not gold mixed with other metals. This was 24 karat, pure gold. 99% fine. You could bite it, and your teeth would meet perfect, soft gold. When you held it, you held real, undeniable value. Constantine wasn't just making a coin. He was making a promise. He was broadcasting a message to every citizen, every soldier, every trader in the known world. The message was simple: this is different. This is not the old, failed Rome. This money is as solid as the empire I am building. And he was building a new empire. He established a new capital in the ancient city of Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople. This city, this new Rome, would become the heart of what we now call the Byzantine Empire. The solidus was its financial heartbeat. From the very first day, it was more than currency. It was a symbol of stability in a terrified world. A soldier knew his pay was real. A merchant knew a contract written in solidus was secure. A foreign king knew that hoarding these coins was the safest way to store his wealth. The old Roman Empire had melted away from within, poisoned by bad money. Constantine's new Byzantine project started with a core of pure, solid gold. It was the ultimate act of faith in the future. But creating a perfect coin is one thing. Keeping it perfect for 800 years? That's the impossible part. That's where the real secret lies. So, Constantine created the perfect gold coin. A great start. But how do you keep it perfect? How do you stop the next emperor, or the one after that, from facing a crisis and thinking, just this once, let's mix in a little copper, just to get through this war. This is where the true genius of the Byzantines comes in. The Solidus didn't survive because of luck. It survived because they built an entire system around it. Think of it like a temple. The Solidus was the sacred treasure inside, and it was held up by 4 unshakable pillars. Remove any one, and the whole thing would have collapsed. Let's look at the first and most obvious pillar, the unbreakable standard. This was a cult of purity. The promise was 24-karat gold, and they treated that promise as sacred. The men who ran the imperial mint weren't just workers, they were guardians. If they were caught debasing the gold, mixing in silver or copper to make more coins, the punishment was severe. We're talking mutilation or even execution. It wasn't just fear. It was about identity. For the Byzantine state, the perfect Solidus was a symbol of their power, their God-given right to rule. To debase it would be to admit weakness, to become like the failed kingdoms they looked down upon. So for century after century, through good times and bad, the gold that came out of the mint stayed the same. You could take a coin from the year 400 and a coin from the year 1000, put them on a scale, and they would weigh the same. Melt them down, and they were the same purity. This consistency built trust that became unbreakable. But pure gold is expensive. Where do you get it? And how do you pay your bills without melting down your own treasure? This brings us to the second pillar, the fiscal foundation. The Byzantines understood a simple, brutal truth. A state that spends more than it earns will eventually eat its own money. So they built one of history's most efficient tax systems. It was organized, it was thorough, and it was fairer than most. They taxed land, they taxed trade, and this steady river of wealth flowed into the imperial treasury in Constantinople. This gold wasn't just piled up in a vault. It was used to pay for the things a stable empire needs. The mighty army that defended its famous walls, the bureaucracy that ran the provinces, the grand churches that showcased its glory. The key was balance. Because they had a reliable income, they could pay for their needs without the panic move of shaving down the coins or printing more. The state funded itself with real value, so it didn't need to steal value from the coins in people's hands. It was a virtuous cycle. Stable money made the economy stronger, which brought in more taxes, which protected the stable money. Now, having gold and collecting taxes is one thing. Managing it all without corruption or chaos is another. That's the third pillar, bureaucratic integrity and brand trust. The Byzantine Empire was a paperwork empire. It was run by a professional civil service, highly educated and organized. The treasury was a sophisticated machine. They knew where the gold was coming from, where it was going, and how much was in the vaults. This wasn't amateur hour. This was professional, institutional money management. And they branded their product. Look at a Solidus. On one side, you have the emperor, not as a warrior, but as a calm, authoritative ruler, often holding a cross. On the other, a symbol of victory or Christian faith. This design changed slowly, predictably. It was instantly recognizable, from London to Baghdad. Counterfeiters couldn't compete. It wasn't just about faking the gold. They had to fake the absolute authority and technical skill of the Roman state. The coin itself was a tiny billboard that screamed, "This is official. This is legitimate. You can trust this." That trust didn't stop at the border. Which leads us to the fourth and final pillar, the global network effect. The Solidus didn't just circulate in Byzantium. It became the world's first truly international reserve currency. Think of it as the US dollar of the Middle Ages. Why? Because everyone, everywhere, trusted it. Viking traders from the north demanded bezants, their name for the Solidus, for their furs and amber. Arab merchants used them on the Silk Road to buy spices and silks from China. Kings in Europe, who issued their own weak, silver coins, hoarded Solidus as the ultimate savings account. It was the common language of world trade. This was the final, brilliant layer of stability. Even if there was a temporary crisis inside the empire, the external demand for the coin remained massive. Its value was protected by the entire world's need for a reliable trading tool. This global trust created a force field around the Solidus, making it even harder for a Byzantine emperor to tamper with it. If he did, he wouldn't just hurt his people, he'd shatter confidence from Paris to Peking, crippling the empire's central role in global commerce. So, there you have it. The 4 pillars that held up an 800-year miracle. 1. A sacred promise of pure gold. 2. A disciplined government that lived within its means. 3. A professional bureaucracy that protected the brand. 4. A global marketplace that demanded its use. It wasn't magic. It was a system of discipline, integrity, and brilliant economics. For 8 centuries, whenever temptation struck, this system pushed back. The pure gold made debasement obvious. The full treasury made it unnecessary. The professional bureaucracy made it difficult. And the watching world made it unthinkably costly. They had built a machine for monetary stability. But even the strongest machines can be smashed. For 8 centuries, the system held. But was it perfect? Did the temptation to cheat ever flicker in the minds of the emperors? The truth is yes. And the story of when it happened is just as important as the story of when it didn't. The first real crack in the golden armor came in the 7th century. The empire faced a true nightmare scenario. 2 existential wars at the same time. In the east, the mighty Persian Empire was tearing apart Byzantine provinces. At the same time, a new and unstoppable force exploded from the Arabian deserts, the armies of Islam. They were capturing some of the richest lands in the empire. The treasury was bleeding. The soldiers needed pay more than ever. In this moment of total crisis, Emperor Heraclius faced the old, terrible choice. So, in the 620s, for the first time since Constantine, the gold standard was bent. He didn't destroy the Solidus. Its legend was too strong. Instead, he created a lighter, fractional coin, the semi-cis, that was a little below the old purity. It was a tactical move to stretch the remaining gold further, to keep the armies in the field. It was a wound, a response to what felt like a fight for survival. And it proved the rule. The moment the system slipped, everyone noticed. Trade faltered. But here's the crucial part. The core, the original full-weight Solidus, the nomisma, remained. It was still the standard. The debasement was a limited, emergency measure, not a new policy. Once the immediate fires were put out, the Byzantines spent the next few centuries trying to nurse their currency back to its old glory. They understood the damage and tried to fix it. The system was resilient. It could survive a crisis and a controlled slip. But could it survive total annihilation? Fast forward to the year 1204. This is where the story takes a dark and tragic turn. An army of crusaders from Western Europe, sent to fight in the Holy Land, instead turned on the richest city in Christendom, Constantinople itself. They didn't just sack the city. They dismantled it. They burned libraries. They smashed ancient statues. They stole treasures beyond imagination. And they shattered the machinery of the Byzantine state. The treasury was looted. The mints fell silent. The sophisticated bureaucracy that managed the empire's finances was scattered to the winds. This was not an economic failure. This was a physical and institutional murder. The Fourth Crusade didn't debase the Solidus. It destroyed the very house that the Solidus was built in. The empire never truly recovered. Even when the Byzantines retook Constantinople 50 years later, they were a ghost of their former selves. Broken, and surrounded by enemies. In these final, fading centuries, emperors in desperate straits did what Constantine had vowed never to do. They debased the gold, now called the hyperpyron, mixing in more and more silver until it was a pale, thin shadow of the mighty Solidus. But this slow decay in the 14th century wasn't the cause of the empire's fall. It was the symptom. The final, fatal blow had already been struck in 1204. The empire was dead on its feet, and its money was simply dying with it. So, let's be clear about the end. The gold Solidus didn't fail because its economics were wrong. It didn't slowly rot from within due to some inevitable flaw. It was killed by an external shock of almost unimaginable violence. Its 800-year run ended not with a whimper of inflation, but with the bang of Crusader siege weapons and the screams of a city being torn apart. This tells us something profound about the Byzantine system. It was strong enough to withstand internal temptation and even recover from a controlled slip during a dire emergency. Its weakness wasn't financial. Its weakness was the same as any human institution. It could be burned, looted, and physically destroyed. The machine for stability was finally, and violently, smashed. But the idea behind it, the lesson it taught the world, refused to die. So, the empire is gone. Constantinople falls to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. The last remnant of Rome vanishes into history. But what about the idea? What about the ghost of that perfect, stable gold coin? It didn't disappear. It went on a journey. First, it traveled west. In the great trading cities of Italy, like Florence and Venice, merchants remembered. They remembered a coin you could trust from one generation to the next. So, in the 13th century, Florence minted its own version, the gold florin. Pure gold, a consistent weight, stamped with the city's symbol, the lily. It became the powerhouse currency of the European Renaissance. Venice answered with the ducat. Same story. Pure gold, reliable weight, the doge kneeling before a saint on its face. For centuries, these coins were the gold standard of Mediterranean trade. They were direct descendants of the Byzantine Solidus. The idea had been reborn. Later, when nations thought about creating stable money, they looked back to this model. When the world moved to the classical gold standard in the 19th century, it was chasing that same Byzantine dream, a currency anchored to something real, something that couldn't be printed away on a whim. But here's the critical question for us today. Is the lesson just, go back to gold? No, that misses the real point. The gold was just the tool. The system was the secret. The Byzantines didn't just have a gold coin. They had a real-world gold standard with institutional guards. Let's break that down. The gold standard part is easy. The coin was literally gold. But the institutional guards, those were the pillars. The professional treasury that said no to emperors. The tax system that funded the empire properly. The legal punishment for mint workers who cheated. The global trust that held the state accountable. The gold was the anchor, but these institutions were the mighty chain that kept the ship from drifting, no matter how stormy the political seas became. Now, look at our world today. We don't use gold coins. Our money is fiat. Its value comes from government decree and, ultimately, our collective trust. The question is, what are our institutional guards? For many countries, the guard is an independent central bank. Its job is not to please politicians today, but to protect the value of the currency for tomorrow. To say no to printing money for short-term gain, just like the Byzantine treasury had to. Another guard is fiscal responsibility. Governments trying, not always successfully, to balance their budgets, to avoid drowning in debt that forces them to devalue their currency. And now, we see new experiments in digital guards. Things like cryptocurrencies with programmed, unchangeable rules for how much money can exist. They are trying to replace human institutions with mathematical code, creating a trustless system. The Byzantine lesson helps us judge all of these. It asks us, how strong are the guards? Is the central bank truly independent, or can it be pressured by politicians facing an election? Are the rules of fiscal responsibility strong laws, or just gentle suggestions that are ignored in a crisis? Is the unchangeable code of a digital currency a strength, or a dangerous rigidity when the real world demands flexibility? The Solidus teaches us that the material, gold, paper, or digital code, matters less than the environment you put it in. You can have perfect gold, but if the emperor can seize the mint on a bad Tuesday, it's worthless. You can have a perfectly coded digital coin, but if everyone loses their password, or a hacker finds a flaw, the trust is gone. The ultimate takeaway from 800 years of stability is not about metal. It's about credible constraints. It's about building systems, whether they're made of laws, independent agencies, or transparent code, that make it politically painful, economically costly, and technically difficult to break the promise of stability. The Byzantines made debasing the coin unthinkable for most of their history because the cost, to their authority, their trade, their very identity, was simply too high. So, when you look at the money in your own life, whether it's dollars, euros, or a digital asset, don't just ask, what is it backed by? Ask the Byzantine question, what is guarding it? What are the rules? Who enforces them? And how hard is it for someone in power to change those rules when it becomes convenient for them, but disastrous for everyone else? The Solidus was more than a coin. It was a centuries-long argument that stability is possible, that money doesn't have to die, but it requires something harder to forge than gold: unwavering discipline, transparent systems, and a profound commitment to the future over the present. The empire is dust, but the argument and the choice it presents to every society is very much alive. For over 800 years, the Byzantine Empire held a line that others said was impossible to hold. They proved that the devaluation of money is not a law of nature. It is a choice. The The story of the gold solidus isn't just ancient history. It is a mirror. It shows us that the value of our money is not found in the paper, the metal, or the code. It is found in the strength of our institutions, the clarity of our rules, and our collective discipline to protect tomorrow from the temptations of today. The Byzantines chose integrity over convenience for centuries. Their coin was the proof. What choices are we making? If you want more stories that challenge the simple narratives of history, stories that uncover the hidden systems behind power and progress, then subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the past. What will our money prove about us? Let's keep asking the big questions together.